All right. Hi, everyone. It's me, Jessica, co-founder of Leia Moon, and today I couldn't be more excited to interview an amazing woman I've been following for a long time, Keli Garza, aka Steamy Chick. Keli founded the Peri-Steam Hydrotherapy Institute to train practitioners in the use of vaginal steam for menstrual and reproductive health, and to further research on the gynecological benefits reported by hundreds of case studies that she's seen to personally. She, along with the fourth trimester author Kimberly Johnson, recently announced an initiative to fund studies on the benefits of vaginal steaming for postpartum women to prove its effectiveness. And I immediately reached out to her the instant I got that email. So now here we are. Keli, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
This is awesome. So I guess we'll start by, introducing you a bit further. Can you tell us a bit more about your background, where you are in the world, and what you're up to?
Sure. My background, I have a degree in international development, and so I've always been interested in like research topics and international topics. And so I had learned about vaginal steaming in 2011 from Marcia Lopez, who is a Mayan abdominal womb healer. And when I learned about it, she said that vaginal steaming was from Guatemala. And so I left there. I had that information, and then it was like I didn't actually use it right away. I didn't, think that I needed it. But a year later, I had a menstrual cycle issue, and I remembered vaginal steaming, and so I started to look everywhere online that I could find it, and I found that there was vaginal steaming at a Korean spa, and it was called Chayok. So I immediately became intrigued. I was like, wait a minute, I heard it was from Guatemala. Now I'm learning that Koreans do it. So I went to the Korean sauna, and I had a vaginal steam. And within 24 hours, my menstrual cycle issue was resolved. My period had been missing for several months, and I wasn't pregnant, and it came back immediately after doing the vaginal steam session. So I was pretty impressed. And I had been talking to the spa owner, the Korean spa owner, and she was telling me all about the practice of vaginal steaming in her country, and that it is used as a preventative method. Like, it should be done regularly on a monthly basis in order to prevent any problems. And so I was really fascinated by that. But I also had some questions. Where was it originally from? Guatemala or Korea? Was there, who taught who? And so over time, I learned that I've found over 40 different countries where vaginal steaming is practiced. So I've concluded that vaginal steaming is a universal practice. It appears that women have been doing it since the beginning of time, and that it's a natural method used to treat different issues and used at different important times in a woman's life, such as postpartum. And so somewhere along the way, I continued to use vaginal steaming, and then I started to refer it to my friends, refer them to doing vaginal steaming, and then I started to make supplies and herbs, and I became Steamy Chick.
Yeah, that's so great. So how many years has Steamy Chick been around?
The first, so I would say since 2013. In 2013, one of my friends was complaining about her period. She had 10-day long heavy periods with clots, cramps, and every other issue, headaches, depression, just all kinds of issues. And so I was like, why don't you vaginal steam? I told her about it, and she said, I'm convinced I want to do it, but I don't want to make a chair and take off the seat and figure out how to like make a vaginal steam sauna. She says, I'm just gonna give you $100. Could you make it for me? And I was just like, okay, I guess, And so that was my very first customer. Because the next week, so she had really incredible results, and immediately with the first, she steamed 3 times in a row, and she had her period. And instead of it being 10 days long, it was 5 days long. Instead of having heavy bleeding, she had medium flow bleeding.
Wow.
And a lot of the other symptoms were gone. So she had such remarkable results. She told her friends, people that I didn't know. So then they reached out to me to also make steam saunas for them and herbs. So I didn't actually ever decide to start a vaginal steam company, but they just never stopped coming after that. You know, those women had their results, then they told their friends, and so people were contacting me from all over the country within a couple of months, asking if I could make them vaginal steam saunas and herbs.
I love that piece of it too, that it is sort of like this, you know, ripple effect of women sharing information, which is proof in and of itself to me that it must have been working for so many of them, that, you know, they're telling their friends and their sisters and their children, and then they're coming back to you. And that within just a matter of months, that many people were super interested in learning more.
Yeah, and I was reluctant the whole while. I was just like, I don't want to talk about vaginas. I don't want to talk about periods. You know, like I was reluctant. This company was built out of need. It was built out of need, right? Because they just never stopped coming. Then somebody published a blog and that went viral. And from there, I mean, that first year, basically the company has been growing at like over 400% every year since it started. Like it grows so fast, it expands so fast that I'm racing to keep up ever since then.
So how many women would you say you've consulted over this 5-year period?
So I worked with over, I think it was 773 women one-on-one. And so at first, when I would give women these vaginal steam supplies, in 2013, there was no information about vaginal steaming online, except for if you Googled the word chayok, you could find, I think there were 2 or 3 articles on Korean steaming. So nobody knew how to use it or what to do. And I also didn't have any instruction. So what I would do is I would just think through it. And I would just think about whatever period problems they had. I used traditional Chinese medicine. I'm not a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, but I was a traditional Chinese medicine patient. I regularly went to an acupuncturist and had learned that there are certain signs of your period that tell you certain things about your health, right? So one of them, for example, is brown blood. Brown blood is a sign of stagnation, right? And the brown blood in the period is like old residue buildup, okay? So just take that. I knew that, right? So when people would tell me about their period, I would just think through it and then figure out what the right herbs and what the right vaginal steam protocol would be for them. And so I would do that with everybody that I gave supplies. Just naturally, I would give them a consultation. And using my research background, I would record their period when they started, and then I would track how it changed after each period, right, with their vaginal steaming. And so I was able to get a lot of information and then make a lot of see a lot of similarities. For example, one of the things that I noticed is that when people did the steaming before their period, if they had stagnation, if they had brown blood or clots, then what would happen is they would steam, and then when the period would come, they'd have a lot more clots. So it was like this cleanse, right? Then the next period after that, usually they would have a completely clean period, right? I was also able to realize that the period isn't a period at all. I don't know what that term actually means. I think that it goes back to, I know anthropologists in the 1800s used to refer to, say that women had a periodic illness. And I think that's where we get the word period from. But I was able to understand that, in fact, the period is a uterine cleanse. So I started to use the term uterine cleanse and educate women. Okay, we want to increase and get a better uterine cleanse and so forth. Jessica, you are frozen. I'm not sure if I'm frozen as well.
Hi, can you see me now? So, I think Kelly's coming back. Are we back? Right, sorry, I have to refresh this from time to time. So if that happens again, I'll be back, but apologies. I was just so shocked by the period being, you know, a periodic illness.
Oh, yeah.
Gross and fright. But it's really,
I thought it was like an indicator of the time, like, oh, there's a period of time and then we get it again, right?
We were just scratching the surface of what really essentially.
You know where I found it out was 1 second here.
Okay.
I went to a talk by Dr. Hutcha Risling Baldy. She is a fantastic scholar. She is Hoopa. She's from the Hoopa Nation in Northern California, and so she has been debunking some myths that anthropologists spread about her tribe. And so I attended a talk, and so she gave a quote from the anthropologist that was talking about women have a periodic illness. He was so disgusted. The anthropologist was so disgusted by it. He just said, women have their time of periodic illness, right? And so anyhow, it made me realize, oh, I have heard that before, you know, and that was something that was said back in the day. And I think that's actually where the term period comes from. But I haven't been able to link our use of the word period back to that. But I don't know. There seems to be a natural evolution of that term.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you're saying too, is what you're like, the period is actually an indicator of health for a woman. It's sort of like the, you know, the fundamental piece of the core of a woman's well-being. So if we don't have, you know, this regular or what we're calling like kind of average menstrual flow cycle, number of days, you know, within that 28-day cycle, that kind of is the first indication that, oh, something's off, or there's something that I need to shift or change. And it sounds like, yeah, through your work, through all these case studies, that's exactly what you were finding. And I know a piece of that too that you were finding was, oh, there really is what you were calling the ideal period or the perfect period, right? If you could talk a little more about that.
Okay, yes. Another thing is that I also surveyed women's periods. So I surveyed over 2,400 women just to hear what their periods were like. And so I gained a lot of information about periods then as well, like what they look like, what doctors are saying about periods, and so on. Okay, so that's where my knowledge base comes from. Okay, so when I worked with that very first customer I told you about, she had a period as different, like so my period, I was missing my period. I didn't have a period before I started vaginal steam, right? So after I vaginal steamed, my period came back, and I had this really nice, clean, fresh red period, and it was 4 days long, medium red flow, and I didn't seem to have the, I get PMS. Like I get angry with everybody, you know. I didn't have that anymore. You know, I noticed that the PMS had gone away. I used to also get like hormonal acne. I noticed that had gone away, right? So I had this really pleasant period. So now when I was working with this my friend, I didn't expect her to, I didn't have any expectations. I just wanted to help her get rid of the clots and cramps that she was having, okay? So, so her period went from 10 days to 5 days. And her very first period after vaginal steaming, she had a lot more clots and old stuff that cleared out, even black goo, okay? Black. So then I was like, well, I don't know, that's probably good, right? And despite all that, the bleeding had gone down. And so then, I advised her to continue to steam. So she steamed again, and when she had her next period, there was only a tiny little bit of clots. And then her next period after that, she had a completely clean period. It was 4 days long, medium red, medium flow, and it began and ended on fresh red blood. And so I was just like, wow, that's my period. That's what my period looks like, you know? And I just noted it to myself, but I was actually pretty weirded out by it. I was just like, wow, like I would have never predicted it. In fact, it was so unbelievable to me that I didn't voice it. I didn't talk about it until years later, after I had observed the same phenomenon happening with woman after woman and client after client who was implementing vaginal steaming. When women do vaginal steaming for 2 to 3 months, sometimes, in some cases, it could take as long as 6 months, sometimes longer, but it's usually 2 to 3 months. Then what happens is another note, with my period survey, what I observed was that I think it was over 99% of women had signs of uterine stagnation, of old residue buildup, right? So we're all walking around with this old residue in our wombs. What it looked like was that when women were clearing it out with vaginal steaming, they all seemed to have a very similar period. 3 days, 4 days long, fresh red blood, begins and ends on fresh red blood, and medium flow. So at a certain point, I just decided to own it and realize, you know what, this is the perfect period. And I can expect that when somebody does vaginal steaming, as long as they keep at it for 2 or 3 months, as long as they use the right herbs and they do it in the right way, they're going to result in this perfect period. So much so that, I mean, that's what I do. When I'm working with anybody, you know, no matter what, if they don't have that perfect period, then I continue to work with them until they get it. And there's very few cases where I can't get somebody to that perfect period. The only time that there is really failure is when the person doesn't want to do the vaginal steaming, right? So in some cases, it requires steaming every day. And some of them, it requires steaming before the period. And sometimes people forget, or they might be traveling. Like, you know, usually the times when it doesn't work is just when somebody hasn't managed to do it, you know?
So over the years, and you've figured out like the protocol for each of these different types of conditions that a woman might be dealing with to help get them kind of recalibrate to what we're calling the perfect period.
And it doesn't matter if they have missing periods or if they're starting with 10 days of heavy flow. Oh, or what about women who are on their periods? I had the longest case I had, somebody was like, I've been on my period for 16 months. I've been bleeding every single day for almost a year and a half. Please help me.
Whoa.
Yeah. So even her, I was able to get her to a perfect period, right? So it's like I have this. So after working with over 700 women, I basically I was getting so many emails and so many messages from women all around the world asking for help that there was really no way for me to help all of these women. So I stopped doing personal consultations, and I referred that out to Raquel Lemus, who is was somebody who I had trained and taught how to use vaginal steam therapy. And she's also a licensed midwife. So I started to refer all of the consultations to her, and I started to train practitioners, train them on these protocols, because there's just no way that I can help all of the women in need. And one thing that really became clear over time is that women aren't getting the care that they need from their doctors. You know, in some of these situations, doctors were aware of what was going on, but they either didn't have the tools to help, or they didn't see it as something that they should help, right? So in the case where the woman was bleeding for 16 months, she had been working closely with her doctor, and he just couldn't get the bleeding to stop, right? I had her bleeding. She stopped bleeding within 24 hours of talking to me.
Wow.
And has never had any bleeding between periods since. She just bleeds when she gets her period, right? So that was that case. And then I'm so sorry, Jessica, I lost my train of thought. I was going somewhere. Then I went off and forgot where I was going.
No, it's great. I mean, it's so fascinating too. Like you're giving women these protocols to steam, which is unique, to whatever her current situation is, but it's still a practice that she takes home and that she's responsible for doing this kind of self-care, which is also really different a lot of times than seeing a doctor. Not that this is wrong or bad. I'm not trying to make this divisive statement, but I think what's so great about it is you're empowering women and other women as facilitators too, to understand how this works, that it does work, and that you can do it really simply from home, the same way that women presumably have been doing this for, centuries upon centuries, and passing down that knowledge. So if anything, you kind of have rediscovered it, by a magical synthesis of all these things going on in your life 5 years ago. And now it's spreading like wildfire, and it's working. And that's why so many people must be tuning into it.
It's so cool. We're taking our health into our own hands, and it's so easy. One of my nicknames for the vaginal steam sauna is a little gynecologist in a box, because what I noticed was all of the issues that women go to a gynecologist for over time, over working with all these 700 women, I was like, oh, every single one of those issues vaginal steaming can address. So this is just as good as going to the gynecologist, if not better, because it's going to address like a lot of the root of the problems. Now, I'm not saying gynecologists are, not useful, but as with everything, if you can address the root of the problem and if you could address it naturally, why not try that first, right? Because gynecology is a field of medicine based on surgery. And in addition to surgery, they also use antibiotics and artificial hormones, okay? And those are basically the options that you have. So if you don't want those options, and if you're not interested in the side effects that go along with those options, why not try something natural, right? I remember what I was saying before. So the lady who had been bleeding for 14 months, she had been working closely with the doctor. I had another woman told me that she was bleeding. She started spontaneous bleeding. She was bleeding so heavy that she was changing her pad every 6 to 7 times per hour, and she still couldn't keep the blood in. Like she was just bleeding, flood bleeding. She was flooding, right? And so she went to her gynecologist, and as she was distraught about the situation because this had never happened before, she didn't know how to get it to stop, and she was really troubled, right? It's a problem when you're bleeding and you're not supposed to be, right? And it wasn't her period, So this woman, she was in her 40s, okay? An important thing when you go to the gynecologist to be aware of, because he told her, you're in your 40s, so this should be expected. As you're moving closer towards menopause, there's going to be unpredictability. He said, but obviously you're very distraught by it. So he offered her, and he wrote her a prescription for antidepressants.
That is so depressing.
And sent her home with no idea what to do about this blood bleeding.
God, I know it's either that or like hysterectomies too, of just saying, oh, I know, we'll just remove this entire like life-giving organ that's like the epicenter of being a woman. I think for so many women that may be the only answer, but in a case like that, definitely not. And in a case like that too, she's not depressed. She's dealing with something that's physically very uncomfortable and needs a solution for that, not another Band-Aid that kind of
antidepressants. Oh my gosh! Like it's just very irresponsible care. And then hysterectomies. So you gotta be aware if you are in your 30s. That's when doctors start talking about hysterectomies, especially if you're in your 30s after if you have children. Okay, so I was actually really surprised. I was at a talk. I was giving a talk, and Linda Alexander was there. She's on Instagram as Lulu Mansion. So she said, she said she has 1 kid. She said, I was telling him that I have, cramping and I'm having this issue or that issue. And he said, well, if you finish having kids, we could just do a hysterectomy. And so she said, she was thinking, you know what? I just want to address these issues. I don't necessarily want to have a hysterectomy. And we were in a room full of like 50 women. And I was shocked. Everybody else was like, oh, my doctor gave me the option too. Oh my gosh, that's what my doctor said. And so it was like this really eye-opening experience where we realized that for cramps, for ovarian cysts, for fibroids, for infections, for heavy bleeding, for all of these different issues, doctors were actually recommending hysterectomies. And the way that they were recommending them was very interesting. They were saying, oh, then you don't have anything to worry about. You won't have any troubles after that. So they were making it it's just going to take, a couple days in the hospital, and then you'll be able to go home and get back on your feet. So number one, they were making it seem like it was a small procedure. Right. Number two, they were making it seem like it was a good preventative healthcare method that would get rid of the problem and also prevent any further issues down the road, right? And then the last thing about it that I learned, after that, then I started to pay more attention to hysterectomies and what was going on. The last thing that I learned for the women that I have worked with who have had hysterectomies was none of their doctors explained that they would go into early menopause. Their hormones would go out of balance. They would start having hot flashes immediately, even if they were in their 20s. None of the doctors told them about those side effects as a result of doing a hysterectomy. And so a lot of women that I work with who have done hysterectomies are actually a little bit shocked, a little bit shell-shocked by some of the things that happened as a result of the hysterectomy that they were not given any information about.
Yeah, so a lot of the times the symptoms that they got the hysterectomy for, like, don't go away. If not, we're almost more like impounded by having this, really major surgery.
It's a major surgery.
This is like this pretty non-invasive, besides a bit of vapors, I suppose.
I know. And then the media have the nerve to say, oh, this could be dangerous. Well, hysterectomies could be dangerous, okay? You have to sign a waiver that you won't sue if you die, okay? Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you do. Like, you have to sign a waiver, even if you want to go, if they're going to do anesthesia on you, you have to sign a waiver that they won't be held responsible in case you die under anesthesia. I mean, these things have really big side effects, and it's not that women don't have the side effects. They do. They do, and I'm the one who sees that are completely out of options. They've done everything the doctor said, and now they're completely out of options. And so that's when that's when certain women start to really look at alternative stuff, because they've done, one thing that I was telling Kimberly Johnson, my colleague who I'm doing the study with, one of the things I was telling her is these women have done nothing wrong. They actually did what was right. They sought help. They had a problem they were concerned about, and they sought help. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, what happens after that, if they get a hysterectomy because they had cramps, or if they get put on the birth control pill? I had one woman, she had heavy bleeding. She was put on the birth control pill. Both her husband and the doctor were pressuring her into it. She wanted to do vaginal steaming, but they ridiculed her. She ended up going onto the pill. And 1 year later, she contacted me, and she had to go off the pill because of liver damage. Yeah. Right? You know what I mean? Like, there's real side effects and real repercussions, and it's not that they don't happen. But what I do find is that we're not aware. We're not discussing it openly. We tend to keep all of it private, but when we compare notes, it's very clear that women, the options that women have, and then the side effects of those options, or the results of them, aren't exactly the best care that we could be getting. It's not the modern care that we should receive.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for so long too, all this information was kind of like withheld or kept private, or only within, certain medical communities. And then at the same time, only within certain communities of women where it was more traditional medicine, or, learning from their grandmothers or whatever it was. But now, with the internet, and even what you're doing with Steamy Chick and having your Steamy Chick vaginal steam forum online, we're able to share information more readily and share those notes so that we can see like what is working and what actually does have a positive effect for the overall well-being of the woman, and not just, for the reproductive area itself, but even like mental wellness. I think that's something too with hormones. When you remove, when you take birth control, for example, and you're taking a synthetic hormone, you're not really engaging anymore with what's happening, naturally within the whole like psychosomatic system that is our body. And so I think there's a huge, issue with that as well, that a lot of people ignore until they're much later. They want to go off of it and they realize, oh, this is who I really am, and this is how I feel around my period.
Yeah. That's one thing that again Kimberly Johnson speaks to. She says I think it's 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 women are like have postpartum depression, and she's like, postpartum depression. She's like, women don't have their natural function. You know what I mean? So yes, they may be sad, but it's not actually a mental health issue. She's like, if women haven't been cared for, if they don't have their bowel functions and they're, shitting themselves and can't now go into public, like, wouldn't that make you feel sad? Like, wouldn't that become it's not actually a mental, one of her points is, it's a lot of times it's not a mental health issue, it's a physiological issue, right? And a woman is being ignored, and so she is now, becoming depressed, or troubled because of this physiological issue that she has, that she may not know even how to get help.
Right. And when she is going to a doctor saying, these are all the things I'm dealing with, help me, to be told, oh, I think you're a little crazy, let's put you on antidepressants.
Yes! Oh my gosh.
I just can't believe we're still living out that same story of like, oh, crazy woman and, powerful doctor. It's just not, we can't.
Very good point.
So yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm so excited about the study that you guys are doing to, again, just put vaginal steaming out there as such a viable option for self-care for women in all phases of life, really. Before we talk a little bit more about that, though, I wanted to talk about steaming in general. Like, what exactly happens? I know you've done some experiments, kind of DIY on your own, and documented, how steam can permeate the cervix and actually enter the uterus, or even just the heat itself. And I don't know if you could tell us a little bit more about that. You're also looking at melting fibroids and if that's possible through steam. What did you find in these experiments?
Okay, well, so I'm fascinated with steam. I was working with women, and as they were having the results, I was just like, wow, but how did that happen? And so a lot of what steam can do, I was just able to make the observations, right? So number one, it appears that steam increases circulation. Okay, so the heat increases circulation to the external and internal genitalia. Just by putting heat into that area, you're improving the body's circulation to that area, which improves the uterine function just on its own. Okay, whether or not the steam gets into it. Number two, steam is a deep cleanser. Okay, so we know in facial care, for example, steam is used to penetrate the cells and to clean even underneath the level of the cells, right? So in cases where women have infections and bacteria and yeast and viruses that, wherever they might be, steam is able to clean it on a whole different level than just water would be able to, right? Steam appears to be able to drain. Okay, so for example, in facial care, that if you have some type of a blemish, you could either take a shower or you could do a facial steam. And what happens? It will drain, right? Well, a lot of the gynecological issues women have are actually some type of a cyst or some type of a pimple, right? So women can get pimples on their cervix. Women can get them. They can get cysts. Cysts inside the vaginal canal. They can get cysts around the urethra area. They can get it around the clitoris. And what is a cyst? It's a pimple filled with pus, right? And so just as easily as a hot shower will drain a pimple on the face, steam is able to drain any fluid that is built up in the external genitalia area. Okay, just because the steam touches that area. Okay. But another thing that has happened working with women, I've seen that steam has gotten rid of women's ovarian cysts, and it gets rid of it almost immediately. Okay, so the cysts are in the ovary, so that's going to be inside the internal reproductive organs. Okay, so that's going to be the uterus, the fallopian tubes, and then the ovaries. The cysts are all the way in the ovaries, right? And so one of the things that you hear critics say is vaginal steaming could never work, and it can't get into the uterus because what these vaginal steam experts don't know is that there's a cervix blocking the steam from getting into there. Oh, okay. I've seen articles like that. So anyhow, if somebody does a vaginal steam, first of all, there's a lot of issues women have that are the external genitalia. Okay, a Bartholin cyst, for example, is right there at the vaginal canal opening. Okay, and we know the steam can touch that area. So women have been able to naturally heal their Bartholin cysts. Number one, there's a lot of issues that aren't even, in the higher reproductive tract. But as far as the higher reproductive tract goes, I don't know how or why. I wish some more scientists would study it. But when women have ovarian cysts, they go away. Okay. Now, I had never actually considered. I know that obviously the steam is increasing the circulation, which is increasing the uterus's own cleansing function and its own behaviors. But what I started to observe was that people were reporting after they steamed, there would be brown menses that came out, brown spotting, if you will, after a steam session. So they would steam, and then there would be brown blood. And then they wouldn't have more brown blood until the next time they steam. And then there would be a little bit of brown blood directly after steaming, right? So maybe they steam at night and then they sleep, they'll have that brown blood. So this was only cases, this only happens when somebody has residue. So if you when I'm working with somebody and they say, yes, I have brown blood in my period, right? And then they steam, nowhere near their period, then brown blood comes out, okay? Then they steam again, brown blood comes out. What does this mean? This means that the steam is not only touching the bottom of the cervix, which we know because it can ascend the vaginal canal and touch the bottom of the cervix. The cervix has an opening, and that opening opens during our menstruation. It opens when a woman is in labor and she's going to deliver her baby, and it can open during orgasm. Okay. Well, if she has old residue in there and she steams, and then that brown comes out, that old residue comes out, then that's a sign that the steam has opened the cervix, opened that cervical opening. It's not. It's an opening. It's a hole that's there that opens. And steam can get through anything. I mean, they used to use it in mail fraud. If they have a mail that's glued shut, you use steam to open it, right? Like it opens glue when there's no hole. Of course, it can open a hole, right? But anyhow, this phenomenon of women having brown come out after they steam is actually well documented now from that I've seen. And so it's a sign that the steam is absolutely opening that cervical opening, and that it is ascending into the uterus. Number one. Number two, women report feeling a sensation of warmth in their uterus. So that's another sign that the steam is getting in there. And then number three, about steam, you like this example. I was wondering, so this one woman, one of my friends, and she's a doctor, she's a medical doctor. She had 2 fibroids, and so I asked her to steam, and she called me and said that her fibroids had fallen out in the toilet. One had fallen out in the toilet, and then later when she was showering, another fibroid came out. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is the first time this had happened. It's now documented that this can happen, and several more people have had these stories. So, and mind you, she was a medical student at the time, but this is a medical student, okay? So she's not some weirdo who has no idea what's going on with their body. According to her, she was able to see the fibroids come out. So anyhow, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, well, what are fibroids? And I started to look up what fibroids look like. They look like white, congealed bits of fat or mucus. Like they look like big white boogers. It's gross, but that's what they look like. So I started to think, well, I wonder how hard they are, and that was something that we were discussing, is like how hard they were. She said it was hard, but it wasn't, I don't know, soft too, So I started to think, how hard is it? So what I did was I took some I took some glue, and I put it inside a jar, and I held it over a pot of boiling water to see how long it would take. Oh, I let it sit for a couple of days before I did it. So it was really hard. Okay. And so I was touching it, and I'm like, I think this might be, as hard as a fibroid might be, right? So I held it over the boiling water to see how long it would take. I think it was within 30 seconds, all of the glue had melted and come down into the pot. So then I did it again, and I put a piece of leather, like a thick piece of plastic, over the jar, and I put I took a needle and I put a little hole in it. And so I got the glue again, I let it sit for a couple days, I put this pleather over it and put a little pop in it, just a little hole, just like a needle. And I held it over there. Oh, actually, this time I put a rack, so I didn't have to hold it because it took longer. After 20 minutes, all of the glue had melted and was down at the bottom of the jar. and a lot of it had already dripped out into the pot. So I was like, okay, so I don't know. Steam can melt things. Steam can melt things even when it's solid, right? And even when it's as solid and hard as glue. And I don't think fibroids are that much. I don't think that they're that much harder than that. I mean, but then like when you really think about it, steam can work its way through granite rock. You know, steam comes up from the earth, and if there's rock right there, it'll work its way right through that rock. It'll work its way through metal. In fact, that's one reason why steam isn't used for engines. It erodes the metal over time, right? So steam really can get through even really thick, strong substances. And we don't have anything like metal or rock in our uterus. Nothing in there is that hard.
And even, I think what you were writing in your experiment too, maybe less steam is coming up into the uterus than through the vaginal canal, because there it's kind of building up more so, but it's on a basic level bringing heat to this area. And even if it's kind of working more at the base of the cervix,
exactly,
still like, you know, it's kind of like a hot air balloon then.
Exactly.
You know, there's a new heat element entering the atmosphere. And you're right, anything that's sort of dangling from the uterine wall that doesn't want to be there anymore. Especially, I think you were describing uterine polyps also as being kind of like phlegm in a way, or like, you know, like a benign tumor, a coagulation of cells. And so that heat can really help kind of decompose that, you know, it's not like a calcified rock in there, it's soft and mucus, like a booger, like you were saying. And then it's coming out through the steam, you know, sessions of people that you work with, and people are getting those results. And I guess, is that more for uterine polyps that are actually within the uterus then, not the ones that are embedded in the uterine wall or on the exterior, or still kind of?
So the harder something is, scar tissue, it's going to take longer to steam, but it can be anywhere. So you can have scar tissue in the fallopian tubes, and I've had cases where it comes out. Okay, so it can be anywhere. Adhesions or something else that are kind of like scar, you know, they're hard. It's harder. So adhesions and scar tissue are the hardest things to get out because they're the hardest matter, you know. But fibroids, fibroids that are inside the uterine cavity are the easiest to get rid of. Then you have fibroids that are in the walls, and then fibroids on the outside. But another thing, just like how you mentioned, even if you just heat the bottom of the jar, it's going to end up heating the jar and help the stuff to melt out. That's basically what's happening with the fibroids that are in the wall or on the outside of the uterine wall. The steam can't directly touch them, but the steam is touching the blood vessels that are in the vaginal canal and cervix that go along the uterus. So still the steam is heating up and improving the circulation of the blood vessels that carry that whole, you know, that throughout that whole area. So so it takes longer. It's more dedication to treat fibroids that are on the outside of the uterine canal, but it still works. It still works.
Wow, awesome. I love that story of the medical student, of them falling out in the shower. I would love to see a photo of that, as crazy as that sounds. Like, we want to
Okay, look, I don't like photos. I don't like looking at this stuff. But if you go into the Steamy Chick vaginal steam forum, there are several more women who have had these cases and they've taken photos, and you can private message them and they'll send you photos.
Oh, yeah. Definitely do this right after.
You're like, that's the very next thing I'm going to do.
Perfect. Well, let's talk a little bit more about your current project then, the 4th trimester vaginal steam study. I know Kimberly Johnson, who you're working with, MAGA Mama, for those of you that may already be following her, she wrote a book called The 4th Trimester, which maybe you can explain. What is the 4th trimester?
Okay, yeah.
It's like a basic.
Yeah, the 4th trimester is basically when you look at pregnancy, there's the 1st trimester, and that's when, you know, these things happen, the 2nd trimester, 3rd trimester, and then a woman gives birth. So now there's this concept that there is actually also a 4th trimester. This is a really important time for the baby's development and the mother's development as well, in order to continue, you know, the process of the breast milk production and the care that a woman needs in order to recover from the delivery. So it's called the 4th trimester. And it's this idea that there should be another 3 months after a woman gives birth that is still dedicated to the whole birthing, to the whole pregnancy and birthing experience. We shouldn't just baby born, done. head back to work. It's not, it doesn't drop off right there. There's still more, there's still more. Right. So that's where the term, I'm not sure who coined that term, but Kimberly Johnson did a really great job. I have her book right here.
Yes, we're getting a look into your whole library. I love it.
So she wrote the book, The Fourth Trimester, a postpartum guide to healing your body, balancing your emotions, and restoring your vitality. And so she really did a lot of, compiling all of the information from around the world of what women have done historically, and the best practices to how women need to take care of themselves postpartum. So because she wrote this book, she in fact, she can't deal with all of it. She has hundreds of people on a waiting list to see her for the help that they could receive postpartum. She's particularly specialized when it comes to like pelvic floor health and scar tissue, repairing scars from postpartum. So she has hundreds of people on a waiting list to see her because she knows how to repair this stuff, right? And so she's, as these people are, hey, can you help me? Hey, I need an appointment with you. She's hearing all of these horror stories, okay? And so it's very similar to what happens with me because I'm able to help women with vaginal steaming. I'm getting all these messages from women with horror stories, okay? And postpartum is one of the really saddest ones because it's like women are just, okay, the postpartum care that women get. So a woman gives birth, the midwife and doctors, whichever one, they check to make sure that she is not bleeding to death. They check to make sure that any of her tears get stitched up or if they need stitches. And then they check to make sure that she is eating and that she can urinate and have a bowel movement. And then she is released from the hospital. Then she gets zero care for 6 weeks. Zero care. She's completely left alone. And then at the 6-week mark, what they do is they check to make sure that, I'm not sure. I don't know what they do at the 6-week mark. They tell her that she can resume sexual activity, and then they offer birth control. Those are the main two purposes of the 6-week visit. So now, what is postpartum recovery? What is postpartum recovery? What is it? What needs to happen for her to be recovered and healed? There's actually not even a definition for it. There's no definition for postpartum recovery. What needs to happen? So I was thinking through it, and one thing is that I work with steaming for postpartum. I myself used it postpartum and had amazing results. So when I work with people for postpartum, there's some very specific things that I'm trying to do. Number one, I want to get all of the lochia out. Okay, so after a woman gives birth, she bleeds. Okay, is all of the lochia out? Doctors don't really check on that. Women can go for up to a year bleeding postpartum, that they gave birth and they're bleeding, and then they continue to bleed for a whole year, and that their doctors tell them it's normal. And then if their doctors do get concerned, they'll do a DNC procedure where they put a sharp tool inside of a woman and then scrape the inside of her uterus, or they'll recommend birth control. In a lot of cases, the birth control doesn't work and she still bleeds. So it's very interesting. A woman gives birth, then the placenta needs to come out, and then all of the birth matter needs to come out. You know how long it takes with vaginal steaming? 1, 2, or 3 vaginal steam sessions, and all of the lochia clears out. I just talked to somebody yesterday, and I asked her. I know she did she steamed 30 days in a row postpartum, and so I asked her how many days until it was no more lochia. She said 3. I also had that experience. I didn't have lochia after. I think it was 3 times with my first child, and then 4 times with my second. No lochia after that. And yet we've got women that are bleeding for a year. I mean, how inconvenient is that, right? You're trying to take care of a baby. There's so much that mothers need to be doing other than we're still bleeding. Do you know what I mean? And there's no reason for it. There's no reason why women should still be bleeding after a year. And yet we don't have a definition for what postpartum recovery means. And so we don't have any protocol for a woman if she's still bleeding. We don't even have, I was never given any information about what needed to happen for me to heal. The one is that people know that they should lose the pregnancy. I think that's what people think postpartum recovery is if you have lost your pregnancy. I think that's the only one. So number one, the lochia needs to be cleared up. Number two, all of the tears should be repaired and the scar tissue should be, healed up, right? Number three, the uterus and all the organs need to go back into place and the uterus needs to shrink down to size, back down to size, okay? And so on. There are actual physiological things that should happen after a woman gives birth in order for her to recover from the birth experience, and it's all natural. But the problem is, since we don't have any definition for it, since doctors leave women alone and don't pay attention to any of these things, women aren't getting the care that they need. They're not recovering, and they're ending up with incontinence. So much so that incontinence is just a joke. You hear every comedian say in every show after a woman gives birth, she says, "Oh yeah, everything's normal except for that I pee sometimes when I sneeze," and then you hear laughter. So her organs haven't returned to their normal function, and this is just a joke. Okay.
I think everyone, my friends. Yeah.
That's an example for how low our bar is for what needs to happen after a woman gives birth. There's no reason why her organs shouldn't return to their normal function. So the elimination organs involved is going to be the urination and defecation, the colon, right? And then the period, right? So the other thing that happens is that women give birth and then when their period returns, they have an awful period, like just really heavy bleeding. No problem. Well, shouldn't the whole pregnancy and birth experience, shouldn't you consider her period as well? When her period returns, wouldn't that be a sign of how the state of her uterus and whether or not she's fully recovered? It is a sign of it, but again, not anything that is entered anybody's mind about what postpartum recovery is. So anyways, with my practitioners, I teach them, first of all, the physiological things that you're looking for to make sure that a woman has recovered postpartum. Number one, she does need to have all of her organs back into place and healthy. She should have eliminated all of the lochia. She shouldn't still be bleeding. You know what I mean? And so on. And then when she has her period, she's maintained and she has to be checked on until she has her period. And when she has her period, then her period is that final indicator for her health at that point and whether or not she's full. And that is the full postpartum period, and that's the full postpartum recovery period that we should be assisting.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because we haven't fully conquered the first 3 trimesters, I guess I should say, but so much attention is given to like just the baby, the mother, in birth sometimes, again, not always. And then, this whole postpartum period is focused so much on childcare and breastfeeding and all these things that you're still kind of like giving away of oneself as the mother, but not how to kind of care best for yourself so that you feel, really able to do all these other jobs that are suddenly being demanded of you. So it's like this whole other world that you're right. We just sort of, sever ourselves from medical care the second the child is born in the hospital or at home or whatever it is. And then you're kind of left to fend for yourself when you're already kind of cut off from communication socially in this way you might have been before, where you could ask your girlfriends, or maybe, traditionally your mother or grandmother would help you in child raising. But the way that our civilization's set up now, we don't always have like those resources ready at hand. So I'm sure it can be horribly isolating too, to suddenly be left in this 4th trimester without any answers, and then trying to go to your doctor to ask, like, is this normal that I'm bleeding really heavily every day, or that, I pee constantly when I just start speaking a sentence, and they just say, oh yeah, you're fine. Oh, maybe you're depressed. Here's some antidepressants just to add to the pile of issues.
Yeah. I was actually accused of being selfish. I set up a postpartum plan for myself after giving birth, and it included meals and so forth. And I was told by my family members that I was being selfish. So that's how much, the brainwashing is, that it's really the baby, only the baby that's important, not the mother. In Taiwanese culture, I have a Taiwanese friend, and she said, she was explaining to me that they really have a strong importance on the postpartum care, because they say that in order for a woman to give birth, she must die. And in order for her to be a good mother, then the community must make sure that she comes back.
Wow.
So it's so beautiful. Like, it's just, and so then another one I heard recently, there's this birth summit done by this wonderful woman. Her name is Layla. I forget her last name, but she did a birth summit and some birth information about the traditional Moroccan birth postpartum experience. And I heard a quote that she shared, which was, when a woman gives birth, her grave is open for 40 days. Yeah. So in other words, if you love that woman, you have to make sure that she doesn't die, right? Because if you don't give her the proper care that she needs, she could die. And I mean, people do die. Women do die, right? I mean, that is like a real thing. So these are just some of the cultural, like if we look historically into some of the cultures and places where they still do take care of the mother, we hear these really great sayings, right? But unfortunately, we've been cut off from that when it comes to our postpartum care. But when you hear them, you just know it's right. I don't know. Are you a mother? I didn't.
No, I hope to be, but yeah, I'm learning a lot, so that's good. But so many of my friends, that almost every one of my friends, especially with incontinence, I hear about that constantly, where they're like, oh yeah, we pee in our pants when we go for a jog, and we pee when we laugh, and we pee. Then I'm like, oh, that can't be. So I'm always sending them information about things I'm reading about, the LV Kegel trainer or, the pee underwear. But still, even that is kind of a patch for a greater issue of just not having the proper postpartum care right out the gate.
Yeah, if the bladder and the uterus and the colon don't all go back to their normal positioning, and the vaginal canal needs to close. The other thing is women are just left completely open. Their vaginal canal may not close, their uterus may not go back up. They're left with complete prolapse afterwards. If the vaginal canal can close and the muscles can, close back up and heal, and then all of the organs can go back into and then you don't have those types of issues. At least that's one of the reasons. It's one of the main things that can prevent that from happening. And there's others, but
so usually, when would a woman seem postpartum? How many days after childbirth, or is this something you can do right away?
Yes. Women should start right away. So the sooner that she starts, the more problems she can prevent. So, for example, something that happens is that women end up back in the hospital due to infections. If the placenta doesn't expel all the way, then it can get infected. And this is going to happen somewhere between 8 to 10 days, that she will end up with a fever, and then her life is at risk, and she has to go and get the infection. So I don't think that women should wait for 30 days before they start, right? You have to get the lochia out. You have to get any placenta out immediately. So it's important to start as soon as possible. Now, as far as how soon you can start, the woman needs to make sure, and this is what I train my practitioners to be able to determine. It is good to get a consultation for postpartum. I want midwives and doulas and postpartum care practitioners to know this and be able to determine when she can start. But basically, you have to make sure that she's not bleeding, that her uterine arteries are still open. There's blood coming out, but that's not the same as like the period where the uterine artery is open. So her uterine arteries are closed, and what's coming out is just the lochia, it's just the leftover matter. So the way that you can know if it's safe for her to start steaming, because usually you would never steam on fresh red blood, the way to know if it's safe is if it is decreasing. As long as her uterine arteries aren't open, then there's going to be some blood that comes out, and then there will be a little bit less and a little bit less, and it will continue like that. The lochia will get less and less until it turns brown, and whatever. But as long as if a woman gives birth, like she may fill up, one pad, and then maybe and then it's one pad every 2 hours, and then one pad every 4 hours. We know that the lochia is decreasing, and then it's safe for her to start. And so she can start. When I'm giving these generalized interviews, I'm going to say start on day 4. It'll be very clear that the lochia is decreasing by day 4. But if working with a practitioner, it's possible to start even earlier. And it's really great because one of the other things that steaming does, and this is important in the immediate postpartum, is when a woman has swollen skin, sometimes the skin gets really swollen and out of place. And so she can't even find you know, or basically everything is out of order, and it's really hard for her elimination functions to go back to normal because of the swollen skin. Steaming reduces that swollen skin in just one session. So it's, you know, that's one thing that it can do, like, very immediate. And then the other thing is that the uterus has to go back down to size. And so, you know, midwives will say, oh, it can take from 4 to 6 weeks for the uterus to go down to size. Well, the uterus stays its size, to go back to its pre-pregnancy state, right? The uterus stays big if there's still stuff in there, right? So if you can clear that locus out, then the uterus goes back to its place, and everything else can go back to its place. And again, then it just really accelerates the recovery, you know, her body getting back to normal. Myself, after 10 days of steaming, I was only 5 pounds over my pre-pregnancy weight, and that 5 pounds was breast milk.
Wow.
You know, the breast milk weighs anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds. So I was, and my stomach looked completely normal, and I didn't have an easy birth. I had a pretty good birth in that, you know, I didn't have any major birth injuries or anything, but I had a 10-pound baby. She was huge. And I had
That's impressive.
prolapse. So my uterus, my cervix was down at my vaginal canal opening. So I had a complete prolapse. After 10 days, my uterus was back to its size. Everything was back in place. My vaginal canal was closed. And I had lost all of my weight, my pregnancy weight. That was after 10 vaginals.
I feel like there's a misconception too about pregnancy weight being like the same thing as, you know, gaining weight, like getting fatter essentially. And it seems like, well, from what you're saying too, it has so much to do with the way the uterus is filled with all of this matter that to, you know, help the baby during gestation. But once the baby's out, like all of that, you know, releasing that from the body, allowing the uterus to reduce back to its state before pregnancy, and then again, like nestle in that space between our bladder and our rectum so that those two organs can also do what they need to do. The quicker we can do that, the happier we are on all ends, literally.
I honestly, I'm not a crier, okay? But I cried inside when I went to the bathroom after. I didn't know where my urethra was. When I wiped, I was touching my cervix, and that was a very uncomfortable feeling. I didn't know I was touching my cervix. My skin was all swollen out of place, and I was scared. I was so scared, Jessica. I was scared and shocked into silence. Like I'm not somebody who talks about this kind of stuff. I was just very quiet, and I came out of the bathroom, and I was just completely distraught because I didn't believe that my body would ever be normal again. So just imagine, mind you, I had been steaming for a couple of years and I had a vaginal steam sauna set up, and I had planned on steaming postpartum, and so I started steaming. Well, remember, there was no information back then. I didn't have access to any information, so I didn't know what was going to happen. Can you imagine after 10 days when I was living in my own body, just as I had always known it, with my cute baby, with all this breast milk? Oh, it also stimulates breast milk production. Which, if you have a lot of breast milk, you have a sleepy baby that just sleeps all day long, and your life is easy. You're not crying for the most part. If you have a lot of breast milk, you have a really easy baby. And so I had this really easy baby with all this breast milk, and my body was back to my own at 10 days. And I have the photo. I have a photo online on a blog of me and my stomach, my muscular stomach after 10 days. And none of this is to say anything about it's a problem if women gain weight. I mean, during pregnancy, you have to eat. During postpartum, you have to eat. I was eating 7 meals a day and lost all of the weight in those 10 days. Okay, so because that was the postpartum meal plan. So this isn't starving yourself. This isn't dieting. Dieting, in fact, is one of the things that makes it so that women don't have their breast milk supply. I wasn't exercising. I was laid up. So that's what that's one of the postpartum things is just lay down and just sleep. Just like the baby does to regain their energy. So I was sleeping, eating 7 meals a day, vaginal steaming, and after 10 days, I had my body back. So one of the things that I learned from Dr. Leah Andrews in her book, 7 Times a Woman, she's a traditional Chinese medicine doctor. And she said that basically the pregnancy weight, a lot of it is like actually just water weight. And so you have to, like, the meals that women are given postpartum are meals that help to shed water weight, because you can shed that water weight immediately. That bloating, you know, the women who have the bloating, the bloated feet or the swollen feet, right? Well, I mean, this is something we know that women have during pregnancy. That's all water weight. And if you can shed it and get rid of it right away through food and through steaming. Steaming is really good for it, right? And if you shed that water weight and get rid of all of that bloating, then it doesn't turn into fat. Fat takes a lot longer to get rid of than water. So that's one of the reasons why. And you know, I feel a little sleep. I don't like to talk about it for weight loss, because weight loss is one of the things that we do get, you know, like slammed with all the time. I mean, look at all of the weight loss pills and products on the market. And so, you know, I feel sleazy, you know, when I sell this, like, oh, this is going to make you lose the weight. But the reality is you don't want extra weight. You know what I mean? And if steaming immediately in postpartum is going to help that water that you were holding during pregnancy, why not? Right? Why not? Why not try it?
Yeah, and instead of like putting the emphasis on like, oh, you're losing weight so that you look better, it's really about you are losing all this extra stuff inside of your uterus that you no longer need to like make you that much lighter. So it's
so
more,
that you recover.
Yeah. So that
We have no standard for postpartum recovery. We need another term that they use, and I don't know who coined it, is mother the mother. The woman needs to be brought back to life so that she could be a mother, so that she could be a good mother to her children, so that she's not walking around depressed. And I mean, we can't lie. Fat does depress women, right? It's a huge issue for us, mainly because of the fat shaming that goes on in our society, and the expectations that we're given of what our images are, right? Which I'm not approving of any of that stuff. But it is something that plays a role for a lot of women, you know, sure, as far as how she feels. And so anyhow, we just know that it is comfortable to be in our own body, right? And so if vaginal steaming can get women back to her own body, like within 30 days, within 10 days, why shouldn't we do it? So again, I was talking to Sophia, I forget her last name, but she is one of my vaginal steam practitioners. And so she conceived at the age of 43 after a couple of miscarriages, and after doctors were saying she was just birth, and to have a successful pregnancy. But she used vaginal steaming for 3 months, got her perfect period, and then conceived. And so she was just, you know, she's just such a sweetheart and stays in contact with me. And she wrote a guest blog about her experience. And then she did her postpartum steaming. And so another question that I asked her was, how long, one of the things that she had posted on Instagram, after 7 days, she was 5 pounds from her
wow.
And she started immediately postpartum. And so this is one of the things, is like, a lot of times we don't know what is safe. So a lot of times what you'll see online is just people posting whatever they think might be safe because they don't know. So there's some information out there that says that you should start after you have no more lochia, no more bleeding, then you should start. Well, that could be 3 months for some, and that's not actually true. You just have to be able to determine when it is safe to start. And again, I train my practitioners to be able to do that.
That's great. No, I think I mentioned to you in an email that I was reading this study from a Swiss university where they went to a really small village in Indonesia because they were also very curious about vaginal steaming. And there they call it Bakera. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, Bakera. And I think they interviewed 14 midwives and about 170 mothers in different villages about this traditional practice, trying to understand its effectiveness and why women do it at all. And in a lot of their interviews, they talked about how some of the women really just did it because it was tradition, which I also think was quite beautiful in the way that you're saying the mothering themselves, their family and neighbors would go out to the garden, gather whatever herbs were really local to their specific area. A lot of them were spices they used for cooking even to create this like aroma therapeutic, hydrotherapeutic experience for her to steam. And I think they would steam, I think they said 3 to 16 days on average after delivery.
Okay.
And continue sometimes for the full month. And all of them reported, feeling completely rejuvenated after birth, and that they were really grateful for this tradition in their villages. And at the end of the study, they determined that, these traditional healing methods are very, are safe and effective for recuperation after childbirth. So it's kind of like exactly what you're about to do in terms of a study here.
That's incredible.
I'll send you the article.
Yes, please send it to me. I do have on the Steamy Chick website, I have a list of clinical studies that have been done on vaginal steaming, and it is really hard to find anything. Chris Gonzalez, the Steamy Chick acupuncturist, found some studies that are in other languages, in Korean and Chinese, of clinical studies they've done on vaginal steaming. But Jessica, I've never heard of this study, and this is really awesome because I'll probably put it on the website. That's really great. So I want to add it to the list of studies so people can.
Yeah, no, it's amazing too, because I think there's probably just so much more of it that exists in these more indigenous, it seems, cultures around the world. And, for a lot of us from our heritage, I'm sure it is kind of part of our lineage as well, but it's been lost over here in Western culture. And I'm just curious why you think that may have happened, especially considering your background more in international studies and anthropology of why have we lost this?
Yeah, I've made the same conclusion as you have, which is basically where I found the majority of cases where vaginal steaming is practiced are in communities where midwives are still attending to care, to women's care. So it was a common and completely universal midwifery tool. So midwives everywhere have used it. In fact, I've even found now African American midwives who have learned the practice and are still using it in the South. Okay, from the American tradition. So everywhere where you have midwives have used this historically. But here in the U.S., midwifery became illegal. It was actually legalized in the 1800s. And so midwives would be put in jail for delivering babies. And in fact, a lot of these laws haven't been overturned. There are still, I believe, don't quote me on this, guys, but this isn't my area of expertise, but there's still like 9 states where it's illegal for a midwife to deliver a baby. And there are midwives right now, like today, that are in jail right now for delivering babies.
No.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Here in the U.S., we have midwives in jail for delivering babies. There's like whole organization. There's like a midwifery legal organization. I don't know the name of it. Who represents those midwives and is trying to work to overturn some of those laws. So anyhow, basically when midwifery became illegalized, that's when we lost the practice. So what happened at the time was that doctors made it illegal for midwives to deliver babies. And then they encouraged, and then so women had to go to the hospitals to deliver babies. And this was a very radical, quick change that happened. And the thing was, doctors did not know anything about childbirth. And they didn't learn what the midwives were doing. They never interviewed them before they threw them in jail. They weren't like going and visiting them in jail and like, hey, by the way, what do you do after a woman gives birth? Uh-oh, you're frozen again.
Sorry. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's crazy. And I guess, yeah, also, I think there probably was at a certain time in the history of medicine where, when it became more of this kind of strict profession, I guess it was a threat, to their body of knowledge that the midwives were performing this magical act or ushering this magical act of giving birth, with women. And then it was sort of like co-opted by the hospitals saying, oh, you can't do that anymore because that's going to be in our domain. And this is what our expertise is going to be. And we're going to be able to charge more money for it. So I think that's, yeah. So
okay,
again,
so here's the funny part, Jessica. The doctors had no idea. Everything that was like the women's periodic illnesses and everything that was childbirth was all considered women's affairs. It wasn't even considered part of medicine in the West. So when the doctors started seeing these women in the hospitals, first of all, the birth mortality rate, in other words, the amount of babies that die and mothers, the maternal mortality rate, it went up because they had no idea what they were doing. And they had these women right next to people who had, plague. and fevers and all kinds of like terminal illnesses. And so what they learned was, oh, wait, if we're going to have these women in the hospital, they need to have their own ward. And that's why we have a maternity ward. They didn't know that. They were working on them right next to other people. They were treating it like an illness. Well, it was never considered an illness before that, right? And since they're doing surgery on these people and giving them drugs and stuff like that, they started doing the same stuff on women. And so much so that the doctors were like, and mind you, at this time in the United States, it was illegal for women to go to med school. So all doctors were men at the time, right? So none of them have ever delivered babies. None of them have ever shadowed midwives to deliver babies. None of them asked the midwives what they were doing. And so this is what the men did. They were looking at these women. They put them up on the table. They looked at their, vaginal canal opening, and they were like, "Baby's this big. Baby's that opening is only this big." They were like, "That baby can't come through that hole." And so what did they do? They developed a cesarean. They cut the woman open and take the baby out because of the problem that the hole wasn't big enough for the baby to come through, right? Now, so the whole history of humanity until that point, surgery wasn't used for babies to be delivered.
Right.
But these men, they saw a problem. They just couldn't understand how the baby was supposed to get through this. And so they started using surgery. So one is the cesarean that was developed, and then the other one was an episiotomy. So what they do is they cut from the vaginal canal opening. They cut the whole perineum I believe all the way to the not all the way to the anus, but they cut the whole perineum to make a bigger hole or a bigger opening. They're extremely painful. They were done as just standard procedure all through the 80s. So, any of us that were born in the 80s, our parents, our mothers probably had standard episiotomies. Nobody was asked. It's just standard practice. So a lot of times the older gynecologists that are in practice will just do it as standard and without even asking for permission.
Yeah, no, and that's still done today, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty often. So
yeah.
It's wild. So again, this is like reiterating the point of like why it's so important now to fund more research for how vaginal steaming can help prevent a lot of these issues and help in postpartum. What medical community and kind of, where it's not this divisive thing where there's alternative medicine and mainstream medicine, but where we're starting to kind of look back to traditional methods and reintegrate them into like our pretty hyper technologically advanced way of being.
Yeah. I mean, there are some really great gynecological tools. I really like ultrasounds. Surgery does save lives. It saves babies' lives and mothers' lives in childbirth in certain situations. However, obstetrics, which is delivering of the babies, hasn't even began to look at what women have done historically. It has really just developed from the point where where midwifery became illegal, and then men decided that surgery needed to happen in order for babies to be born. Right. So obstetrics and gynecology has focused on surgery. These were actual surgeons that worked on women to deliver babies. But I do believe that obstetrics and gynecology are in their infant stages because they haven't actually started to look at how the body naturally does these things without the assistance of surgery. And so that's it's just a reality that they didn't look at that stuff. They started using surgery as a result, right? And also drugs, right? So there is a lot that has yet to be studied and understood about the body from the point of science. And when we look at the traditional birthing practices and what midwives do in indigenous communities now and what they have done throughout the West in the past as well, we find some really, really wise tools. So actually, vaginal steaming, I refer to it as an ancient medicine, women's ancient medicine. This was the medicine that we developed. It's not that it's non-scientific. There is science, and you can study what steam does and why it's having these effects on the body. It's just that it hasn't been studied very much, and the studies are obscure and hard to find. So it's actually great that you found that study about it. But every time that there are studies on vaginal steaming, they show the great potential of this as an incredible women's health tool. And then the beauty of it is that women have known this all along. We developed this. This is our medicine. It doesn't involve knives. It doesn't involve scrapey tools, and it doesn't involve drugs with the side effects of liver damage, and et cetera, et cetera. The list is very long. Okay, so it's just it's really beautiful. It's a really beautiful thing that we are resurging and reclaiming these practices. We do have the freedom to do it. And also, one other thing, medicine doesn't have to exist separate from this. There are gynecologists. There's a spa in New York where there's a gynecologist, a vaginal steam spa, where there's a gynecologist who does the intake and does the vaginal steam session. Number one. Number two, in Germany, when they have birth, they have a midwife and a doctor next to each other. And the midwife does the stuff that the midwife does, and the doctor does the stuff that the doctor does. And that's beautiful. And in fact, in Germany, the midwives will use vaginal steaming prior to delivery in order to get the woman ready for the delivery. That's like the domain of the midwife, is some of those postpartum care and some of the getting the woman into labor and some of those things, right? That's going to be the domain of some of the knowledge that midwives have that doctors in Germany acknowledge that they don't have, and that the birth is better for having that midwife there who knows how to get the woman into labor and knows how to help her afterwards.
I think that's great. And even the more research that, the project that you're working on right now with Kimberly, the more, real reports we have to present to the medical community to help integrate these practices rather than make them feel threatening, because that's definitely what we want. We do want to reduce the amount of surgeries or more invasive, procedures that get kind of subpar results compared to vaginal steaming, which is getting really good results for these same types of women's health issues.
It's incredible.
So the hope is that we can just become, better collaborators and not make it seem like there's this alternative thing that's like, thin air.
Well, we're the ambassadors, Jessica. We're the ones that we have degrees. We're not scared of academia. We're not scared of doctors. We're not scared of not going to the doctor and using our own methods. We just happen to be safe in that space. Not everybody is,
This is true.
But, we're in that space and we're willing to be the ambassadors. We can speak the language. We know academia. You didn't mention to them that you have a degree in architecture. She's an architect. You know what I mean? So she knows the language. Me, I have a master's degree. I took the time to do a master's degree, so I know how to write a report. I know how to design a study. You see what I mean? So we are playing that role as ambassadors, and then there are people that, one example would be Haiti. In Haiti, they have always been using vaginal steaming. They weren't cut off from the practice, and they're very secretive. They don't share it very readily. I'm okay with that too. You know what I mean? But we are playing the role of the ambassadors of helping to bring it back to life, for Western women, that just to put it into context, to understand that even if your doctor didn't recommend it, it may be something that's valuable. And here's some information that will show you why, right? And so, this whole project is one of those. I do believe that if we do this study, that it will be able to bring this to so many more women and be that bridge to the medical community. There are doctors that are interested in this. There are doctors that are my customers and my clients that have had amazing results. None of them will say anything about it. None of them will speak about it because they will get ridiculed and they will get shamed. Yeah. This study is going to be a bridge so that even if a doctor did want to talk about it and share her personal experience with getting the perfect period or getting pregnant as a result of using it, or getting rid of fibroids where she was getting medical care, fibroids weren't taken care of, and now they were, right? Yeah, we have situations where doctors can claim this, and yet they don't because of the ridicule. And all you have to do is Google vaginal steaming to see the type of ridicule.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of critics out there. We actually interviewed a gynecologist who's in think she's in Atlanta, Dr. Tasha Rogers, and she also offers vaginal steaming at her practice. And
no way, that's awesome.
She was an interesting woman to talk to. So yeah, I feel like she would be a good spokesperson also for everything that we're doing.
That's awesome. You know, we need more gynecologists like that aren't afraid to be like, you know what, we don't know everything. We still have more to learn. You know, this is science. Science isn't meant to be static. It's meant to move forward, right? So, so that's cool. I'm really glad to hear about Dr. Rogers.
I'm seeing somebody that's viewing was asking a question, so I'm just going to put it up here so that we can answer quick. I think she was referring. She says, "Can you correct it 5 years after last birth?" I think she was writing that when we were talking about incontinence and like other prolapse and those types of issues.
Yes, yes. We just case after case. Women have birth injuries and complications that have been since they gave birth, and I've seen it corrected 20 years later. So, you know, in fact, that first case that I was working with, the woman, she was like, my periods were never like this before giving birth. So the terrible period she was having was actually a result of improper postpartum recovery. And yet within it was 4 years after her last birth, when she's tried the vaginal steaming. And so then even just after 1 month, she was able to see the results. So, so yes, things can be corrected later as well. Vaginal steaming is like, it's ridiculous, Jessica. Like, it's just like,
it's a catch-all for like,
it's a real big catch-all. It just resets everything. I mean, to the point that, you know, I had this one woman, she's just like, I have had this elbow injury and I vaginal steamed and it's the first time I don't have any pain. And then I've had 3 more women say that about knee pain. And I'm just like, should I add this to the list? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it seems so incredible. But what happens is that it creates circulation. You know, when you clear up the stagnation in the abdomen, it increases the circulation all over the body, which increases the body's normal function of being able to repair itself. And so it just fixes everything.
I know, and some of the pieces too that we didn't really cover in this interview, and at least some women that advocate for steaming talk about it a bit more, about like the kind of emotional or like spiritual aspects to it. It's just like, it's never ending how many great things can happen just from the simple act of bringing heat to that part of your body. We store so much there, and it's also, you know, kind of like our throat, this sort of sphincter muscle, that when you're bringing heat, that you finally get to relax this piece of yourself that you may have been, you know, holding on to so tightly for the past, you know, just as a result of like impounding life experience that may have been abusive or whatever it was, even on a subtle level. So I think it just, as just a self-care practice and as a ritual, it can bring so much to a woman's life in that regard. And
yeah, the statistics about, you know, the sexual abuse rate, you know, rates are just really staggering. The amount of women that have negative sexual experiences or abuse or rape and so forth. And so I think it's 1 in every 3 women, you know, has had a specific sexual abuse. But then I think like all women have had negative sexual experiences, even if it wasn't a rape, right? So when you think about it, what goes into the vagina? Penis, tampons, sex toys, right? There's very few things that go in there that's not like, you know, that's just kind of real natural. So the steam goes in there and it's just so gentle and so, you know, nice and so nourishing. And then if the steam is making its way into the uterus, what goes into the uterus? The only thing that goes into the uterus is, during a DNC procedure, would be a scraping tool. And then, so you maybe have a scraping tool, or you have a sperm gets in there. How do you get sperm out of the uterus? There's no way to do it, right? Like, there's nothing else that goes in there other than sperm, which could turn into baby, or doctors that will, you know, either use surgery or do a scraping, right? There's nothing that goes in there. Steam gets in there. So it's like you have the core of your body that nothing can get inside of, right? And where women hold all of our emotions, and yet the steam is getting into our core and is able to clear out all of those ghosts from the past. Uh-oh. Do you want to refresh?
I'm back. Okay.
Hi. One more thought about steam getting into the uterus and how this helps emotionally. Like we even have in our language, oh, somebody's got bad blood or old blood, right? Well, if we're literally holding on to old blood in our uterus and now we're able to clear it out, how does that help us to move forward? It helps us to move forward and to let go of things that were, that are from the past. So anyhow, steam is really incredible for our emotional and spiritual well-being.
And then, so for the study that you're going to be conducting, will you be doing the research yourself, or do you have plans to put together a research team?
Yeah, so I have designed the study. Me and Kimberly designed the study together, and we are going to fund the study. We are going to do the research because we can't do the research without it being a conflict of interest. Basically, you need to make sure that the research is really as objective as possible. So we have hired a midwife as our head researcher. She's going to do all of the recruiting from people, not from our audience, right? Because if it's from our audience, again, we've got too many issues, right? So she's going to do all of the recruiting through her midwife circle and either through a birth center or a hospital. And she's going to recruit 20 women to take part in the study. And what she's going to do is she is going to do a vaginal exam and look at several different indicators after the woman gives birth. And these are all some of the indicators that doctors don't take into consideration, right? So, for example, her lochia, if she's still bleeding, what color it is, how much, stuff like that. So she's going to look at these indicators, and then also uterine organ placement, whether the vaginal canal has closed back. So she's going to look at all these indicators, and she's going to do an exam on all 20 of these women. Okay, then half of the women, they're going to do a vaginal steaming. And they're going to do 5 days of vaginal steaming, just because we don't have very many resources. We're funding this ourselves, right? So she is now all of them are going to do the exact same vaginal steaming because her and her research assistant are going to facilitate every single steam session to make sure that every single they're all using the exact same setup and the exact everything is the same. Okay, so half of the group is going to do vaginal steaming, and half of the group is not going to do. And then she's going to do exams again on all 20 of them. And what we'll do is we'll be able to take that information and see from the women who steamed, was there any difference in their healing and their recovery versus the women that didn't steam, right? So we'll be able to see as far as uterine placement, stitches, whether the vaginal canal has closed, lochia. We're going to see if they're going to be.
Amazing. So how can we help as an audience get in touch and help fund?
We've been getting tons of emails of people saying, can we participate in the study? We're not going to do the recruiting. Our researchers are going to do that, and it's going to be, all done in a professional way. So what we need is the money to pay them. Okay, so we have 2 to 3 researchers. We have one head researcher, and then she's going to have 1 or 2 assistants to be able to carry out all the vaginal steaming. And so we need the funds to pay for their salary. It's going to take about 3 months to do the study. And so we've hired them. We're planning to give them an outright salary. All of the money goes towards the researchers and the supplies that they need, so that we have all the same supplies for everybody. And also the lab work. We're going to do blood tests on the women before and after. So we need, so all of that is what the $25,000 that we need goes towards. Every single penny. None of it goes to me. None of it goes to Kimberly. We both make money through our businesses. We don't need money, for this. We're commissioning the study. We designed it. We want to see what the results of it are going to be. And then when the study is done, one of us is going to write it up, and then we are going to get this information. Well, as long as it has the results we're expecting, we're going to get this information out as far and wide as possible. So my role is to raise these funds. And so I sent out an email, the one that you got, where you invited me and said that you wanted to help. Thank you so much. We need to get the word out there. We have already raised thousands of dollars headed towards our goal, but we still have further to go. So So anyhow, we have a website. It's called Fourth Trimester, vaginalsteamstudy.com. And you can go right to that website to donate. You can also get to that website through the steamychick.com website. I have it in the menu. It says fourth trimester vaginal steam study. You can click on that and it will take you to the website where you can donate. And then another cool thing that you guys might want to check out on there, we have stories of the negligent postpartum care, some of the stories that we receive from women of what their doctors aren't taking care of them and leaving them to themselves. And then we have stories of what women are reporting after they steam, some of the really miraculous recovery stories of using steaming. So check those out as well.
Really super easy. And one of my favorite places too is the Steamy Chick Vaginal Steam Forum on Facebook. So anyone watching it that wants to learn more about steaming and just talk to people firsthand and be part of the dialogue, that's also another great place to go. But yeah, I'm so grateful for this whole talk and conversation and to finally meet you virtually, but feels a little bit less virtual than I was dealing with before, at least. And we really appreciate all that you're contributing to this aspect of being alive, to women's health and the livelihood of the planet, really. So thank you so much for your time and best of luck on the study. And I'm super happy to support it and blast it as much as I can too.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I feel the same about everything that you're doing, and I'm so excited about it.